Hello, I'm Robert Godwin-Jones from Virginia Commonwealth University. In my presentation, I'm going to be talking about creating an open textbook for intercultural communication. I'll tell you a little bit about the background of the project, the partners who've been involved, and the design considerations, and show you what it looks like today. A little bit about how I got started with this. A few years ago, the foreign language program at VCU decided to add a core requirement for intercultural communication competence through a new course, Communicating Across Cultures, which I was the first one to teach. And this was subsequently added also as a requirement for all students majoring in international studies. Both of those majors are housed in my unit, the School of World Studies at VCU. So the original course design was very traditional, taught in a way that's taught typically in the United States in programs in communication studies, with heavy emphasis on the work of Edward Hall and Garrett Hofstede, and drawing from linguistic anthropology and social psychology. There are a number of similar courses that are offered in professional tracks at various programs at VCU. I think this is not unusual in the United States. The first time I taught this 5 or 6 years ago, I was learning as I was going and used very traditional approach and traditional textbook as well. Wasn't real thrilled with that, but it was a learning experience for me. So I was happy to have an opportunity to revise the content of the course, and this came up through an internal grant opportunity that involved finding one or more partners abroad with whom to collaborate to create an online version of the course. And I decided I wanted to do two things basically through this revision. One was to create new materials, an online open textbook that would be more international, less US-centric. And the second was to find telecollaboration partners for my students. So I found partners in India and South Africa initially, and subsequently, as I've worked on the textbook, I've found additional partners who have served as reviewers. So I actually have two sets of partners now, those folks who are working with the textbook, and also schools with whom I've had my students do telecollaboration. And so currently my students are working with an institution, Wenzhou University in Taiwan, doing telecollaboration. I'm not going to be talking about that much in my presentation today because I'm be focusing on the actual textbook. So in revising how I taught the course, one of the main things I wanted to do was revise the content with more emphasis on language. Surprising to me as I started looking at textbooks for intercultural communication, the popular ones that are used in the United States, how little emphasis was placed on language. In fact, one of the most popular textbooks has a chapter called language as a barrier, and it seemed to me that language was a bridge, not a barrier. So I wanted to put a lot more emphasis on language, and this was particularly important for American students, given the fact that most of the students, at least at VCU, are monolinguals and take a foreign language only because there's a foreign language requirement. So I wanted to have this textbook be less US-centric, and so it was wonderful to have my main collaborating partner from the Indian Institute of Technology at Kharagpur, whose actually background is in business communication. So she has been a great resource and been a great help in broadening the perspective in the textbook. And as I mentioned before, I have other collaborators as well. So I wanted to have something that would be open and shareable, and that would be available in different formats, and that would be available both as a standalone textbook, but also integrated into interactive tutorials, and I'll be talking about that. So I wanted something that would be digital, that could be shareable, so that people could use the whole thing, or take what they thought would fit their needs. And I wanted something that could be revised. So I wanted it not just to be available in PDF, but also, if folks are interested, the version in Word that they can edit. And I definitely wanted it to be digital. So I wanted it, the content, to be able to be used in a variety of formats, and I wanted it to be open and usable on mobile devices, and for it kind of eyeing the option for students who are non-English speakers to be using the content. I wanted the media to have as much help as possible in terms of transcripts and subtitles. So this was the text was first used a couple of years ago in an online version of the course, and subsequently was used last year in a team-taught course in Kharagpur in India with a colleague, and I'm currently using it in a hybrid course that I teach every semester. So the current version of the textbook has 7 chapters, and each chapter has 2 parts, multiple sections, but 2 parts, and the organization is designed so that each chapter will be covered in 2 weeks over the course of the semester, and we have a 15-week semester, so that works out pretty well. When it's taught in the summer, it's taught in a 8-week session, and there are the 7 chapters. Basically, 1 chapter is covered a week, so it's a little more intensive. So I'll be showing you what it looks like. First of all, just the text by itself, and then show you the interactive version in HTML, but also in EPUB. So this is the table of contents. As I mentioned before, there are 7 chapters. So it starts off with an introduction that I call Broadening Horizons, goes into culture and identity, so culture formation today. And then there are 2 chapters that deal with language from different perspectives, language and society, which deals with sociolinguistics, pragmatic use of language, world languages, kind of an introduction to linguistics as well, talks about English as a world language. And then 4th chapter, Communicating and Relating, deals with communication styles. This chapter on nonverbal communication, chapter on intercultural communication and context, and then the final chapter on encountering other cultures deals with culture shock and also achieving cultural mediated cultural encounters, namely through books, novels, and movies. So this is what the beginning of the textbook looks like. Each chapter currently as a PDF runs 30 or 35 pages. This is what a typical page will look like. There are images throughout, links as well, and so it's not it's a PDF, so it's not really interactive. And I'll show you the HTML version in a minute. The textbook is also available as an ebook. So this is an EPUB version of what you just saw as a PDF. This is as rendered in ebooks on a Mac. One of the advantages to having an EPUB is that it's easily downloadable and viewable on a mobile device, and so for uses in countries where mobile devices are more common than desktop or laptop computers, this is, I think, an important consideration. So I'll show you the version of the text that's integrated into online tutorials. As I say, this is an HTML, uses traditional standards in HTML, CSS for formatting, and JavaScript for interactivity. There's no Flash, there's no Java. So each module typically consists of 7 pages, and the text is only one of those pages. The fourth page starts with an introduction, an overview. There's typically the next page is a video clip that works as an advanced organizer to introduce the main concepts in that particular unit, and I have notes on that video. And then comes the actual text. The text is incorporated into the HTML, but there's also a link to the PDF version if students would rather read it that way, or if they want, they can print it out, in fact. Then there's a narrated presentation. This is a PowerPoint presentation that I've narrated, and that covers emphasizes the main points in the unit. Set of links, and then the final page is a set of formative assessments. Also provides an opportunity for the comments for the students to comment on the content of that particular unit. So this is the first page of the first unit, and you see that it lists the learning objectives. These are what you saw as well in the textbook. One of the things that I'm working on now is syncing up the content, because the content's been recently revised in the textbook, and I need to sync that up with what is in the online tutorial. You see that the key concepts are available there at the beginning as well, and there's typically a cartoon that accompanies this introduction, as well as a video introduction that's available here within the HTML, or our students can view it on YouTube as well. You see that there's also a feed there from a blog that I maintain, and the feed actually pulls from the blog the content, the blog posts that align with the content of that particular unit. So for example, for the unit on nonverbal communication, it will pull the blog posts that are tagged for that particular topic. One of the things that I'm working on now is that there will be a blog that is a student curation blog that is just being set up now. And the idea is that the students will be doing what I've been doing for the last few years, and namely finding stories to write about, to add to that blog, and these will be added into this blog feed along with whatever I write on my blog. As I mentioned, at the final page of the tutorial, there's an opportunity for students to write comments. Very few, I have to say, very few students have done that, but I wanted to make that available to students. So the content is available as HTML, which means it can be put on the open web, but it also can be linked into a learning management system. We use Blackboard. One of the advantages of having the content loaded as saved as an LTI package. LTI is a standard that supports third-party content being integrated into an LMS. One of the advantages of packaging content as LTI is that it integrates into the LMS gradebook. And so in my case, what that means is that when students access the tutorial, they'll see a message like this that that keeps track of their progress working through the tutorial. And if they've, for example, worked on any of the assessments, it remembers where they were and what their score was, and retains that information and updates that as they're going through the tutorial an additional time. This is really provides me as the instructor a way to make sure that students are actually working their way through the tutorial. So there are points attached to that go into the gradebook, but the main purpose is really just to check to make sure the students are working their way through the tutorial. The tutorials are also available as ebooks or in EPUB 3 format, and this format, the current EPUB 3 format, allows for interactivity because it supports JavaScript. So what that means is that you can have that same kind of interactivity that you can have on an HTML page in EPUB. Actually, EPUB, the format just uses, in fact, HTML5. So if you already have your content in HTML, it's very easy to convert it to EPUB. There are other ways that you can do that. You can use, for example, the Pages word processor on a Mac that allows you to save as an EPUB as well. So the content here is available as an ebook, both just the text but also the tutorials. And so the tutorials, this is the text. The tutorials include video. This is the video clip for the unit opener, and that plays perfectly well in an ebook as well, as do the interactive exercises. Here there's a multiple choice assessment as well as a click, drag and drop exercise as well. So interactivity is also possible on ebooks. And I think that's the end of my presentation, and I think there's an opportunity, I believe, to ask questions by email or through some other format for the conference. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have.